Hi, I'm Dave Gross, and I'm joined today by Jim Clausing, John Hogoboom, and Nancy Grover. And today is Thursday, July 7th, 2011. We have a great show for you today. First, Jim is going to talk about some follow-up items from last week. We were talking about reloading systems after an infection, and so we have some follow-up to that discussion. Then I'm going to talk about something that came up very recently, iOS zero-day vulnerabilities. And then Nancy's going to talk to us about a report from Cisco on the changing characteristics of spam. And then John's going to go into some new Android malware that's come up and talk about the Internet anomalies. So, Jim, why don't you take it away and talk about the follow-ups from last week?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, after last week's discussion on whether or not Microsoft was suggesting reloading systems from scratch, the question came up in email, what to do if the system came preloaded and you don't have all of the media to restore it. And, in most cases, hopefully, in a corporate environment, we've got some sort of a gold image that is easy to restore to. But in with somebody's home machine, if you happen to lose the DVDs or you never got them, some vendors these days aren't even shipping them, what do you do? And in most cases, if you don't have a DVD that comes from the vendor, you either have another partition on the machine that you can boot from to do the restore, or there's usually some method of creating your own restore DVD or CD, but that can be an issue if you don't have all of the media, especially applications that you've installed after the initial install, can be a bit of a problem.
Well, wouldn't, at least with Microsoft products, you could just go to their site, right, and re-download. Let's say you're missing the Windows Media Player or something along those lines, or a Visio, say, reader. You could just go and get it from them, I would guess, unless, of course, you work for a corporation that doesn't allow you to download things.
Well, that can be one problem. The other problem is, for example, if you've got a system that came with, Microsoft Office installed, you didn't get the DVDs for it. You just got the system preloaded with Office. I know via TechNet it's possible to download the ISO image and all of that, but it's kind of a large download to try to download it off the internet, and then you've got to make sure that you've got the right keys in order to activate it. So it's something that needs to be thought about before you get to the point where you have to re-image a machine. When you're getting a new machine at home, you should, if you don't already have one, you should create the restore DVDs if you can.
Right, or contact your vendor right away to try to get a hold of some restore DVDs so that you have it when you need it.
But it's something that, as I said, you need to think about before you get to the point where you have to do the reinstall. By the time that you have to reinstall the system, it's too late to create the restore media again. So anyway, as I said, this just came up in some email since last week, so I figured it probably was worth mentioning.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. That was very interesting, and we definitely have to attend to that so that we're prepared if we need to deal with that. The next topic is the iOS zero-day vulnerabilities. I'm going to talk about that. If you can see the screen, there's a couple of there's a lot of articles that have come out about this. Here's one from ZDNet, and there's another one from Computer World talking about this group that usually deals with jailbreaking phones, and they found a way to exploit a vulnerability. So I have a slide that kind of goes over the details, so we'll walk through that. The exploit app was released at this site, www.jailbreakme.com, which is seems to be an ongoing project that keeps coming up with new ways to jailbreak these iPhones. It was released Wednesday, just yesterday, by an individual named Comex, and he also credits a team of others that helped to come up with this. They released the jailbreak app on the site with no prior notification to Apple, which, normally you want to give the vendor time to figure out some patches so that this way, when the vulnerability is public, there's a way to patch it. At this point, we don't have patches for it, so, if other people can figure out how to do this, everybody is sitting there vulnerable until the fix is available. It exploits a bug in the iOS processing of certain fonts, and it does this using a specially crafted PDF document. Part of the exploit is doing a privilege escalation because everything on iOS is sandbox, so this will escape the sandbox. And another protection that they have on iOS is ASLR, which is address space layout randomization, meaning that different routines are not in the same place all the time, so you can't count on the addresses being there, so they can't wire that into the malware. So this exploit has found a way to get around that, to be able to consistently get into the right routines and do the exploits. Once these exploits are run, it gives access to all the information and capabilities of the device, so anything that's on there or anything that you're doing with the device or anything that can be activated on the device, they would have access to. And it affects all devices running iOS version 4.3.3, which is iPhones, iPads, iPod Touch, that's it. And there's speculation that it likely affects prior versions also, but I don't know that that's been verified. Comex also released the patch for the main vulnerability that allowed him to get in, the font PDF vulnerability, but it only works on jailbroken devices. So once you jailbreak it with his work, then you can apply the patch so that you're protected from other sites that would exploit that to get in and cause other malware. We're not recommending that you jailbreak your phone or your device. It's just that he's released that as, he knows what the vulnerability is, so he's released a way to patch it. And Apple is diligently working on a fix, so expect an updated version of iOS soon. And until the fix, avoid or at least be very selective about opening PDF documents on these devices.
Wow, Dave, I was going to ask questions, but you answered all of them as you went along. So my question that you did answer, but I just wanted to make it kind of clear here. If I have a non-broken or jailbroken phone, I have a regular phone that's legit, and I get infected with this, the only way at this very moment that I can fix it is to jailbreak it in order to get the patch, because that's the only way the patch is going to work. That's right? Is that what you said?
Yes, but the patch, this isn't an officially sanctioned patch.
Right. It's the guy who created it patch.
Right.
Or who identified the vulnerabilities patch, I should say.
That's right. So, it hasn't been, thoroughly tested, and, it's not really the right way to go. The right way to go is to wait for Apple to come up with a fix.
So what would somebody do in the meantime? Just try to avoid downloading anything that contains a PDF, or?
Yes. Yeah, avoid opening PDFs. Or if there's certain PDFs that you absolutely have to open on these devices, be very selective about doing it. You know where it's coming from and know that it's a legitimate source before you open it.
Okay, and then just in case a viewer has, or one of our viewers might have a question. So basically it's the way the iOS is processing certain fonts that you mentioned. So they've identified which fonts are the problem, and then they're including those fonts within the PDF, and so the PDF opens, it's trying to use that font, and that's where the vulnerability can be injected. Is that what's happening?
Yes, and that's the door that lets them in, but then they have other exploits that they use once they that far.
And since the issue is with font handling, although right now the exploit has been embedded in a PDF, it's possible that they can find some other vectors to use to get it in there. So right now it's PDFs we have to be careful about. If Apple is slow about patching this, we may need to be careful about other types of documents as well.
Right. That's pretty amazing. I like the whole address space layout randomization. That's a pretty neat feature. Too bad this thing circumvents it.
Yep.
Really a great feature overall.
It doesn't. It's something that they've started putting in Windows a few versions back, and it helps make it more difficult, but it doesn't stop the malware writers from basically searching all of the address space to find just slows them down a little bit.
Right.
One of the things that strikes me as interesting about this is that the iPhone has traditionally been very solid in terms of security, and mostly it's because the Apple Marketplace, they're very strict about vetting apps that end up on there. So it seems like they always are looking for exploit vulnerabilities that are remote exploits against the phone, whereas in a little bit we're going to talk about some Android exploits, and most of those are delivered right through the marketplace where they're able to just slip them in because it's not as well controlled, as well as alternate marketplaces are available for Android. So something to consider. The iPhone, so far, it's been pretty solid security-wise, and they have to go through a lot of hoops and whatever to find a vulnerability to exploit on in order to exploit the phone.
And this particular one is one of the first exploits that we've seen that it can be successful on the iPad too. Newest, the newest of the systems. The other thing I wanted to mention here real quick is, since we're talking about iOS devices, is the Australian Defense Department has released a hardening guide for iOS devices, for the iPod Touch, the iPhone, and the iPad. And it doesn't say a whole lot that we haven't talked about in the past, but it is the first one that I've seen that really has done a careful study of the devices and goes through some of the standard things that we've been saying about Windows machines and Unix servers and all of that for some time. So we'll put the URL for that in the page that accompanies the webcast on the Tech Channel there.
What was that group again? Australia?
It's the Defense Department for Australia.
Oh, great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion of that issue. I do want to mention that we don't endorse the jailbreaking, so be patient with the patch. I mean, everybody is relying on Apple to get this out quickly, so make sure that you do that.
Right. Jailbreaking will open a whole other can of worms that most people don't want to have to deal with.
That's right. All right, moving on here, Nancy, you're going to talk to us about spam.
basically, I wanted to talk about this report that Cisco recently put out, and it's called Email Attacks, This Time It's Personal, and it came out at the end of June. And it's a pretty interesting look at the current state of spam. So according to this report, there's half as many mass spam emails coming out. And I don't know about you all, but I'm noticing I was just thinking about this the other day, in fact. I've had a significant less amount of spam all of a sudden, in my spam folder, and I was wondering why that was. Well, it turns out that, the attackers are trying to go for more of a targeted attack, so a lot of those phishing attacks that we might get that it's aimed at everyone, they're going for more spear phishing. So they're seeking out specific people or specific users of a bank, say, or specific members of a corporation. And they're doing this, of course, because their results are much, much better. So, for instance, last year, according to this report, there was something like 300 billion spam messages sent out. This year, there were only 40 billion so far. So even if that doubles by the end of the year, that's a whole lot less. So this chart that I did put up, now this is just an example shown by Cisco. Doesn't mean that this is exactly what they're seeing, but let's say you have an email campaign. You have like 1 million emails that were sent out. Maybe only 3% of the people clicked on it or opened it, rather. Those of the emails that actually got through the spam filters, that is. Maybe 5% did a click-through type of a thing. If somebody responds to that and the attacker is able to have stolen their information or stolen a credit card number, say, or gotten the user to send them some money in some way, it comes out to about $2,000 per victim. And it doesn't cost a whole lot to send out a mass email, as you can see. In this instance, you got about $16,000 to send it all out, and then they got this profit. But if you look at the spear phishing attack or a very targeted attack, you can see they sent out far fewer messages. And in doing so, in targeting somebody, they can really make this thing look very, very legitimate. I might think that it's something, definitely from my bank. They've taken a lot of time and care to make it look just like my bank site, say, or make the URL look like it came from my bank. And then you can see that I'm more apt to open it, like 70% of the people might be, more apt to click through it. It may cost these people a whole lot more money to produce this type of attack, but you can see that the profit is tremendously higher for them also. So anyway, I just thought that it was a really interesting report. And also, Cisco went on to say that it costs about $2.10 per remediation effort on the part of an organization, but it costs $6.40 to repair their reputation. So let's say a bank was targeted and it went out and it attacked a bunch of their customers and it looked like it came from the bank. Bank's got to spend a whole lot of money to try to repair their image that these guys kind of messed with. So anyway, that's really the gist of the report. Again, I just found it really interesting and kind of the direction that things are going. And I don't know, I guess, we just got to still continue to put out the word that people shouldn't click on things. And if your bank sends you an email, don't respond to the email. Instead, go directly to their site to find out what's going on. Don't rely on the link that you get in the email. And you guys have any other tips or comments?
They have to mention in the report, usually a spear phishing campaign means that they know something about you. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm curious is where are they getting the information about that I'm a member of this bank or this website, and then they're going to spear phish me an email purporting to be from, some business that I have a trusted relationship with.
Right. I was thinking about that, and some of that may be from some of these breaches that we've talked about earlier this year, like the Epsilon breach, where they send out email on behalf of some of their customers, and they had a breach of, customer lists from 200 of their customer corporations. So, some of that stuff may be leaking out and may help.
Right, they're paying these guys who've got that information for the information so that they can target. So that is definitely going to be one of the places that they can. I know Michael's, the craft store, was recently had a big issue with those, those.
They're credit card machines.
Yeah, so you went up and you scanned your card and right in front of the cashier, no less, and put in your PIN number, and of course it just captured that information. Well, now they know exactly where you bank. They can sell that. They might not take the money themselves, but they can sell it, and then those people can in turn do it like a spear phishing attack on me. So
yeah, the other thing is, yes, spear phishing is going to be more bang for the buck, but it takes more upfront work.
Mm-hmm.
But the other reason that we're seeing somewhat less of the mass phishing attacks is that we've had some pretty high-profile takedowns. Law enforcement and some of the big, Microsoft went after some of the big botnets that were doing a lot of the mass spamming that we were seeing in the past. So that's some of the reason the numbers are down, is because there's been a concerted effort over the last year or two to go after the big spammers too.
Right, a lot of the botnets that are responsible for sending out a lot of that spam have been taken down. So that you're right. That's probably a good reason that has been reduced as well.
Right. The Mega D one was one of the biggest spamming, especially pharmaceutical spamming, I believe. And I was just looking it up here. They arrested the operator of that guy, the FBI did, back in 2010, towards the end of last year. So that would be a good indication of why maybe those numbers went down. And that was responsible for at least 30 to 35% of all the spam worldwide, that particular one.
Yeah, and Rustock was another big one that they took down,
mm-hmm.
and that took a big chunk out of it. But what happens is, it throws a kink in it for a while, but then another botnet will take over doing the spam. They just have to reorganize a little bit.
Right. And you know what? Even though they might get less money for that big mass attack, it's still money. I mean, because it does, according to this report, it costs 5 times as much to target the attack rather than just send out a mass emailing. So if people don't have that kind of money, time, or want to put in that kind of effort, they're just going to keep building those bots.
And we do know that spear phishing has been particularly successful with advanced persistent threat type of attacks. And even more so, the purporting to be a bank, they usually purport to be somebody that you know, or maybe have some kind of business relationship with, you've communicated with before. Looks like a very plausible email, so be wary of anything that even looks a little fishy, especially if it contains an attachment or a link to some other website.
And John?
What's that?
I said, was that your fishy comment a pun?
No. Didn't even catch it.
Yep, but that's a good point, and you're on guard for things like financial and stuff like that, but you're not as much on guard for something that seems innocuous, but it could carry a malicious payload and, compromise your machine.
Right.
Or something coming from government regulators. That's one other way that they've been getting in, is to send spam that looks like it came from a legitimate government organization.
Right. But that doesn't count the all those FBI emails I get about Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are pretty obviously fake.
Yeah, those are very obvious, but they're always, a lot of times from the FBI. So, keep in mind a lot of those governmental organizations are never, ever going to send you an email, period. And people shouldn't fall for that one.
Unless you have an established relationship with them.
Right. Well, yes. Then I guess you're telling me I've got to be careful even then.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to verify that it really came from them.
Right. Now, one thing I do that, I could throw out as a little tip is if you see, well, number one, I try never to ever click on a link that I get, in email, unless I can look at the URL and it looks pretty legitimate. But that can also, of course, be spoofed. But if you were to right-click on a link and look at the properties, then you can see where it's really going. And sometimes it's very, very different than the link that you see before your eyes in the email.
Right.
Or you read all of your email as plain text, like I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Yep, that's a better way to go.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Nancy. That was very interesting, and it shows another aspect that people need to be more concerned about. So thank you very much. So now we'll move on to John, and John has a couple of topics coming up here. First, he's going to talk about some new Android malware. Just when you thought it was safe to use Androids again, I guess you have to be a little careful about this stuff. And then John will move on and talk about the Internet anomalies.
Okay, so Android, nothing new here. We'll go over these kind of quickly. We know that, like we were talking about, iPhone has been pretty good in terms of keeping malware off of it. Android, not so much, and it seems to be picking up speed. In the past week, we actually have had 3 new pieces of Android malware come out. A couple are delivered via marketplaces. One's actually delivered via SMS, and it kind of lures you into installing an app. So the 3 that we have is CruiseWin is the first. That one, initially, you'll get an SMS text message directing you to go to a URL. When you go there, it will ask you to install an application. If you do that, then you're infected. Once it's installed, all it seems to do is harvest your IMEI, which is an individual identifier on your phone, and then it will install additional apps. And I'm not quite sure if those apps are also more malware. I would, hazard to guess they are, but I don't know that that's been determined yet. The next one is Gold Dream. This one also came out last week or maybe earlier this week. Spreads via some alternate markets, mostly in China. So you would have to have your phone set to allow me to install from other marketplaces, not from the official Android marketplace. This one's interesting because it does some bad things. It will steal your SMS text messages and upload them to a command and control. And it will also get copies of your call log details and send that up to someplace. So somebody that you don't know is harvesting your text messages, looking at the conversations you're engaged in, and know what phone numbers have been calling you and ones that you've been calling.
Now, what do you think they would do with that? Do some targeted spear phishing?
Possibly. I'm not even really sure what they would do with it yet. Maybe some other people have some ideas, but
target some of those other numbers for additional SMS.
Right.
With that.
You could smish them or vish them. Smishing is when you send a SMS text message, and vishing is when you do a voice. You actually call them and maybe try to social engineer them into something, so they could use that for that purpose.
Right, and you may actually be able to get some more private information or more targeted information from the SMS itself that they stole that would help make the shmish be more convincing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you're not done with this. Let me interrupt you for the CruiseWin. Spreads via SMS. So exactly what is that doing? It's let's say I have an Android phone. It's sending me an SMS with a link, and then I'm going to click on it, and then it's going to do something, or?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Exactly right.
The link
that I was initiating something in some way. Okay.
Nope.
The link claims to be, I believe that in this particular one, the link claims to be like an antivirus kind of a security app.
Right.
And so far, this one really, the CruiseWin one, has only been targeting people in Eastern Europe, so you might not have to worry so much here. We haven't really seen people in the United States receiving these SMS text messages. The last one on the list was SND apps. This one actually is on the Android marketplace. It's still there as of right before the show started. I just checked. So it's in about 5 or 6 apps, I think, up on the Android marketplace. If you install any one of those apps, it's basically a Trojaned app. It's got this malware embedded inside. This one harvests a bunch of pieces of information: the IMEI, the phone number, country, your network carrier that your phone is set up with, and it also harvests the first email address registered on the device, probably for spam type things or other social engineering type of things. So something to keep an eye out for. The S&D apps one I consider a little bit more troubling because, again, it's actually made its way onto the Android marketplace, which should be a very well-vetted marketplace, in my opinion. But as we've seen, there have been ones that have been able to slip on, such as Droid Dream, and I think there have been a few others as well.
Now, John, these are the names of the Trojans that are have been identified. Are these actually in versions of apps that are legitimate apps?
Well, on the Android marketplace, the apps that the S&D apps ones Trojan is in, they look like legitimate apps. There's like a flashlight app. I forget. I have to bring up the web page to be sure. I probably should have included a link here for it. But in any event, there's like a flashlight, a couple of other little simple ones, like some noisemaker apps, things like that, that just kind of goofy little gimmicky apps that you might want to download, and they pretend, and then beneath the scenes there, it's got this malware inside of it. The Gold Dream, I believe, is also the same. I did not get a look at the apps that it's hiding in, but that one is not on the Android marketplace proper. It's only in some alternate marketplaces, particularly spreading in China. And then the Cruisewind one, which we initially talked about, as Jim said, I think he was right about there, purports to be an antivirus-type app.
Okay. So the people using the Androids wouldn't be seeing these names.
No.
They would be seeing these, legitimate app names or, the apps that claim to be legitimate.
That's right.
Particularly games, since people like to load games on their phones to play while they've got nothing else to do. So that I know the Gold Dream was in a number of Chinese language games, and the big problem is when these make it into the real Android marketplace, how do you know? You don't.
Right. Well, there's the question then, what do you do about it? How do you protect yourself from something like this, not knowing that there is a malicious piece to the app?
Right.
It has to do with the permissions?
The permissions are one, why would a game need to look at your call log or be able to, or your SMS messages? So that's one thing, is to look at the permissions. But sometimes you're not sure why they need it, but sometimes the legitimate apps need more than I think they probably should.
But
or at least they ask for it.
Yeah.
Are you alerted to that? Let's say I downloaded a flashlight, and is it going to tell me all the things that it wants access to? I mean.
Yes, when you install a new app on an Android device, it tells you what before you click the final OK, it tells you what whether it needs access to your the SD card, the full network access, whether it'll prevent your device from going to sleep, all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing, is you need to look at that. Why should games care about your call log? The other thing is most of the antivirus security applications do catch up with these fairly quickly. So, even though it's not foolproof and it's an arms race, it's an additional layer of defense to run one of the antivirus type security applications, and there are a half dozen of them out there that are good.
So it relies then, you're relying on, where is it getting this information from? So I'm going to download this flashlight, and it's going to tell me it's going to, have access to SMS, or it's going to have access to this and this and this. Does that rely on the app maker to provide that information, or is the OS knowing what the app is doing? Does that make sense?
I think it's part of the configuration that comes down with the app. The phone or the Android device has to allow the app to get to certain sensitive things that are on the device.
Okay.
And so in order for it to do that, it has to notify the device that it's going to be doing that.
Okay.
In order for the device to give it permission.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to know, if I was relying on the app writer to tell me this, or I'm relying on the OS, and I would feel much better relying on the OS, of course.
But having said all of that, it's possible for some of the malware, in the past, has installed apps in the background. It kind of intercepts that and says okay on your behalf. And if somebody gets a hold of your Google password, they can install it through the marketplace, and it never shows up. That never pops up on the device. It downloads and installs in the background. It shows up on the web page on the marketplace, but you can do the remote install through your web browser, and that never shows up on the device as, hey, it's installing, do you want to allow this?
So I shouldn't get excited if I suddenly find a brand new game sitting there waiting for me.
Well, I'd be worried if I saw a brand new game waiting for me.
Okay, John, you want to move on to our Internet anomalies?
Sure. Let's take a look at those. Okay, so the recent Internet activity anomalies, there's not actually a whole lot new. I just need to clean up my screen here. There's not a whole lot new this week compared to last week. It's been kind of a slow week. I'm going to go over a few things that have popped up here. We actually kind of touched on them before. So UDP destination port 27015 and TCP source port 27030. These are not security events. They're actually related to gaming. We touched on that last week. There was a game that was released for free starting just at the end of June here, and that's when we see this kind of pickup in activity. I had to split them into two graphs here because they're two different types of metrics that they're measuring against here. But you can see right around the June 29th time frame here is when things really picked up steam. No pun intended, because that's the name of the service, is Steam, the gaming software. In any event, so this is not a security event, but probably related to gaming. It probably doesn't hurt that a lot of people are off, or a lot of kids are off from school now, and there's probably just an increase in gaming activity just because of that, because they've got their days free now as well.
And so, given a few more weeks of this, our threshold will adjust to that'll be the normal background level, right?
Possibly. Although I think they might be pulling this back. It's like a 2-week free gaming thing for this particular one that I think is accounting for this. So it might be interesting to look at in a couple of weeks here, but I'm not sure. I didn't really read the article fully on their website.
What else would use that port?
Not much. It's really well known as being, and it's a very popular gaming service. The next one that kind of I want to highlight here is towards the bottom here. We have TCP destination port 20134. This is not a particular port that's used for anything, and in this particular event, I don't think it actually had any particular meaning. But I'll show you what it was. This was actually a DDoS event. It's kind of hard to see here, but the 20134 activity, I've laid it over the top of a particular subnet address block that we know. I had to obfuscate who it was. But this is a victim who their normal noise floor is very low. They have no activity. They received a ton of SYN packets on this port 20134, right around, I guess it was some point today, we actually got that spike. It's not a significantly large spike. It's big enough to warrant an alarm on our side, but nothing to be terribly worried about. The person themselves might be concerned because they're getting hammered with packets on this port. The one thing I did notice is when I look back, that same address block was hit on 20889 TCP earlier, and that's what this one is here, this spike, back on July 4th. So they were targeted twice. There is a particular victim involved here. I don't believe they were a customer of ours, but that's what that is related to. So at least this one illustrates something visible here. There wasn't much else on here that we hadn't already talked about. There's really not many big movers and shakers in terms of...
They're all busy playing that Steam game.
What's that?
I said they're all busy playing the Steam game.
Possibly. They're too busy playing games to cause any havoc. I'd rather keep it that way, honestly. In terms of Internet Protect alerts, we actually haven't posted any alerts so far this week. We'll take a look at some of the old ones that we've had. As I said, it's been a pretty slow week for us, and no complaints from my side. I don't really want lots of business in this respect. But in terms of port 139 TCP, this is probably, we mentioned it last week, it's probably systems looking for vulnerable Windows systems that they can connect to. We actually had the bulk of the activity here was last week, and you can see it's kind of dribbled out here. So we kind of get back down to that normal noise floor again. So that's why we don't have any alarms on it. But I just thought I'd mention or show that, after this burst of activity, it has subsided since then. Another one that we were looking at for a few weeks now has been 5900 TCP, which is VNC. Very well known that there's lots of malicious actors out there, mostly botnets and coordinated scanning activity, going to look for endpoints out on the internet that are running or hosting VNC servers. A lot of people do this so they can remote access into their home machine, maybe while they're away. You can see there's kind of a normal noise floor that we've had here, and it's been kind of going up towards June, and we had a little dip, but it's still pretty much on an upturn relatively. I didn't really plot a logarithmic graph here, but it looks like it's still on an elevated trend. So something to keep an eye out for. If you run VNC, try to pick something else. I'd recommend Remote Desktop Protocol. It's a little bit more secure, but I'd also recommend SSH with your VNC. That would be my ultimate recommendation, is to tunnel it over SSH. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say is, lock it down, tunnel it over SSH or OpenVPN, and only allow, those systems to access it.
Right.
Expecting.
Right.
That's all I had in that regard.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Jim, John, Nancy, you had some very interesting things come up, very interesting presentations, and points came up for what we were discussing today. Don't forget on the show, the feedback email address, if you have questions or want to give us feedback, is cyberthreat@list.att.com. The recordings are posted at the Tech Channel website, http techchannel.att.com. And also there's a podcast version, so you can search iTunes for the AT&T Cyber Threat Report. So on behalf of Jim, John, Nancy, and I'm Dave Gross, thank you for viewing, and tune in for the next show.